97 grams. That's pretty good, right? Without weighing. Oh, that's made me really happy. An insight into my personality. Okay, we all have our tried and tested classic recipes that we make over and over again. So today I want to show you how I make my cottage pie. I've got a delicious, crispy, Hellim, cheesy, minty topping to those potatoes that are complemented by a really rich beef sauce. Cannot wait to show you this one. Let's go. Okay, so I've prepped all my ingredients. So I've got the finely chopped carrots, onions and celery here, finely chopped mushrooms, the mince, potatoes are ready to boil, and then to go into that lovely meaty ragu sauce, I've got a mixture here of some stock, beef stock, 800 millilitres. There, I've got 5 tablespoons of gravy granules, I've got 4 tablespoons of tomato puree, and I'm just adding 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce to it as well. And that's going to be added later to thicken up that lovely beef mixture. I'm going to get the potatoes on the boil now, and then we can start making the lovely rich beef sauce that will form the base of the cottage pie. So I've got 1.5 kilos of Meliz pie potatoes there. I'm just going to season it with a little bit of salt. Obviously this will be seasoned again when we mash up those potatoes. And I've got 3 tablespoons of olive oil in this pan, which is waiting for the vegetables to be added and softened before we add the meat to that. So let's get cooking. So we want the oil to be hot so that when the vegetables hit them, they sizzle. But you want to turn that heat down so that they cook slowly and caramelise before you add the mince to the mixture as well. Again, we're always going for really nice, soft, jammy, caramelised, sweet vegetables to form the base of any kind of meaty or even vegetable-based sauce. So we've got the carrots, onions and celery going in all together. They're all nice, hard root vegetables, so they'll soften together slowly. Give them a gentle stir to coat them in the oil, and then you can turn the heat down and give them a gentle stir every now and then so that they don't catch and start to burn. You don't want the vegetables to burn, you want them to soften, caramelise, turn sweet and almost go kind of jammy and glossy. Okay, so my cottage pie has a cheesy, crispy topping, almost burek-like, because I put some sesame and nigella seeds on top too. So I've got here some Pecorino Romano, about 50 grams. You can use any kind of hard cheese that you want. You could use just a mature cheddar, you could use a manchego, anything like that basically that has a nice rich nutty hard cheese flavour. Nothing too strong. And then we're also obviously going to grate in some Hellim as well. So just about 50 grams of each. And this Hellim is just sheep and goat's Hellim, so it's proper good stuff. I'm just going to pop around half a teaspoon of dried mint in there, I don't want too much. Okay, so the onions, carrots and celery have had about 14 minutes on a low heat. You can see they're lovely and jammy now. So I'm going to stir the mushrooms through for about 30 seconds, and then again, like I did with the vegetables, I'm just going to leave everything alone for a little bit, just so that the mushrooms start to brown. And then give them another stir after a couple of minutes, and then we're ready to add the mince into the pan and start to get that meaty base really going. Do take your time with things like softening vegetables, making sure they're chopped finely enough so that they really do soften. If you leave them too big, they're going to stay hard and raw even once they've been cooked in the oven and cooked in liquid. And it adds so much more flavour when you're softening them and caramelising them. A natural sweetness that you get from these root vegetables, even with the mushrooms as well. And you've got things like pomegranate molasses going in there, it will be balanced out by some balsamic vinegar. You've got tomatoes, Worcestershire sauce. It's really about loads of lovely bold flavours coming together to create a really comforting meal. So just take your time, don't rush it. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just turn the heat up ever so slightly so that we'll really start browning those mushrooms, and then I'm going to add the beef mince. I've got some really good quality beef mince from the butcher, because even that does make a difference. So if you can, get yourself the best quality beef mince you can buy. Also, a little bit of fat is good. That will add so much more flavour to the cottage pie. Oh, and I've said cottage pie. There's an age-old debate. So I call this cottage pie because I use beef mince, and I've always been led to believe that shepherd's pie is made with lamb mince. But apparently, it's not just the type of mince that you use that differentiates between a shepherd's pie and a cottage pie. It's to do with how the potato is either made or layered on top. So mashed potato is shepherd's pie, and then cottage pie has sliced potato. But you see, I thought that was like a hot pot, but apparently it's only a hot pot if there's a stew underneath. Do you know what? I don't really care. This is my beef mince Meliz Cooks style cottage pie. That's what we're doing, okay? So that's what we're calling it. And it hasn't got discs of potato on top. It's got cheesy, Hellim-y, pecorino-y, minty mash on top with seeds on it. So there. So that's my one. This is perfect now. So overall, I'll say that we've been softening these vegetables for a good 25 minutes or so, all together now with the mushrooms too. So we're going in with 800 grams of beef mince now. If you wanted to use lamb, you absolutely could. It would not make a difference. In fact, the fact that the topping has mince in it would be really complimentary for lamb. So feel free, you know, if you don't eat beef and you prefer to make it with lamb, that's fine. But I've always made it with beef mince, so that's why I'm sharing this recipe with you. So even though this is obviously going to be cooked in the oven, once I add the remaining liquid ingredients to it, I still give the meat sauce a good half an hour to cook on the stove before layering up. And I allow the meat sauce to cool down before adding the mashed potato topping to it. Otherwise, everything's going to start to mix into each other and you're going to have, which is fine, you know, if you want a bit of your meat sauce on top of your potatoes, but I do love those nice distinct layers. So allowing both the filling and the topping to cool ever so slightly before you start to layer it up, highly advise doing that. So the lovely beefy sauce is looking ready to have the remaining ingredients added to it. So we've still got a few more ingredients left to go in. I've got the pomegranate molasses, balsamic vinegar, bit of sweet and tang there. I'm going to go in with a few thyme sprigs, just the leaves. Turn this down ever so slightly as well, it's come up to a boil. Obviously we need some seasoning, so I've got 1 teaspoon of sea salt flakes and I've got about 3/4 teaspoon of coarse black pepper, and then just in with the bay leaves. I'm going to pop the lid on and let it simmer for about 30 minutes. Okay, so I've drained the boiled potatoes, I've added a pinch of salt and black pepper to them, and we're going to quickly mash them now using a potato masher, but then we're going to actually sieve them. Now, if you have a potato ricer, that's absolutely fine. I've just added the butter and milk to soften in the hot potatoes as well while I mash. So I've roughly mashed up the mashed potato, and now I'm just going to sieve the mash a little bit at a time. Okay, remember when you use a sieve, use a spatula to push it through. It makes it much easier because of the shape of the spatula and it's bendy. So before I finish off the mashed potato, I want to go and look at the meat sauce. I've given it a couple of stirs throughout that half an hour, and I want to get that into a dish to cool before we put the topping on top of that. So whilst the meat sauce is cooling, I have seasoned the sieved mashed potato with coarse black pepper and sea salt flakes, and now I'm going to add the Hellim, Pecorino Romano and dried mint to the mashed potato mixture. I don't put any of this cheese on top because Hellim doesn't melt in the same way that a typical melty cheese would, like cheddar for example. Okay, so the meat sauce is cooled now, so we're ready to pop the mashed potato on top. That lovely Hellim, Pecorino, minty, buttery mashed potato. I'm using 2 spoons here. I don't want to start spreading it out yet. I'm going to spoon them on like this, and then I'll spread them out once I've popped it on. And if you did want to make a vegetarian version of this, you could leave out the beef mince and just use some lovely nutty lentils. I always find that poi lentils are really lovely in kind of meat replacement recipes. So they've got a lovely bite to them. They are quite meaty in their texture, and just chuck in double the amount of mushrooms that I chucked in as well. Be delicious just the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop this dish into this tray that I've lined with baking paper, because the filling can have a tendency to overspill, so you don't want to be cleaning out your oven. So line the tray with baking paper as well, so you don't have to scrub a tray. And then you're going to just pop this in the oven like that once you're done. But we're not done, because you've got the last bit, and that's just a sprinkling of sesame and nigella seeds. There we go, sesame, and slightly less of nigella seeds. So I've probably got about 1/4 of a teaspoon of sesame seeds there. I'll probably just put a little pinch of the black sesame or nigella seeds here. Okay, so into the oven. So it's in the oven now. It's going to have about 30 to 40 minutes in there on the middle shelf. I mean, trust your instincts. If you want it slightly darker, golden brown, leave it in there for a little bit longer, but we'll check up on it in about 30 to 40 minutes and see how it's done. Okay, so the cottage pie has been in the oven for about 35 minutes, just a little bit longer, and it looks ready to me. I'm taking it out. Look at those bubbles. Oh my goodness me. The edges are looking deliciously crispy and juicy. We've got these lovely crispy ridges here too. I'm just going to let it settle for about half an hour or so, because I want to see those two lovely distinct layers. And if you spoon it out when it's too hot, it's all going to mix into each other. So once we've done that, we'll be ready to eat. Okay, the cottage pie is ready to dig into, which is exactly what I'm going to do now. Look at that. Still hot, still utterly delicious. It's still actually really hot, so you could even rest it for a little bit longer. Ain't nobody got time for that. We want to eat cottage pie. Oh yeah. Oh gosh. Super, super rich, tasty, cheesy, oozy, yummy. Any more adjectives to describe this incredible cottage pie? No, just leave me alone. I want to eat in peace now.